Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 156 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, everybody. We are back to talk about Nebraska football. This is a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. We are a father-son duo here today to talk about Nebraska's loss to Michigan, as well as the other big games from Week 5 of college football, and what's coming up next week in terms of Nebraska's Illinois game and the other exciting matchups of Week 6.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's been it was an amazing weekend, and I'm looking forward to talking with you about all the details.
Yeah, not so amazing for Nebraska football fans, but we kind of expected it, so it wasn't too hard of a pill to swallow.
We could have a whole podcast just talking about the fact that, I would have lost my ability to concentrate and been angry for, a month after a whipping like this, if it had happened for most of my young adult life, right? But I've gotten used to this. And in fact, I know I always try to be somewhat optimistic and consider what Nebraska might be able to do. But I knew going into this game that this was not something we were really counting on as a W, and I was just hoping we didn't get embarrassed. But I was at the game, and it was apparent, literally during warmups, who was going to win this football game.
All right.
Seriously, Michigan is a very impressive looking football team.
Yeah. Well, they're the number 2 ranked team in the country right now for a reason, right?
Exactly right. Right. So I guess that makes it really appropriate for me to just want to drown my sorrows and drink a beer. So I think we should proceed with that tradition of ours. And I have been socializing with friends and family now for 3 tailgate weekends in a row. So it's time to get back on a more modest kick. So I'm having a Miller Lite tonight for my beer.
Nice. And I have my Sapporo beer here. So I'll be going through some of these in the next few podcasts.
Yes. All righty, bud. Well, cheers to you, sir.
All right. Cheers.
I tell you. Yeah. And it was nice tonight. It was another night that we were able to spend with family. One of my sisters and one of my brothers, your aunts and uncles, of course. And it's just nice to be able to catch up with your brothers and sisters. And my brother Mike and I had a great conversation today.
Well, that's good. Now we decided we wanted to kick things off on a more positive note. So instead of talking about Nebraska football, we'll start talking about Nebraska volleyball. And the girls did have quite a challenge in this past week when they had to play against Purdue, and ended up going to 5 sets with the Nebraska win. But given our status in the nationwide rankings and everything, you would like to have seen us be able to beat them in 3 or 4 sets for sure.
Well, that's true, and that's what most expected as well, of course. So, but actually, if you watch the match, you came away as impressed by what Purdue was able to do as what Nebraska was doing, right? So did Nebraska play their best match or their best sets? Absolutely not. They really struggled in some areas that, frankly, before that match, you hadn't seen all year. But, you've got a team that starts 4 freshmen regularly. And so this actually was a match that we kind of needed, right? We needed a match where our team struggled and then had to find a way to dig out of a bad performance. They were not performing well. They were not playing what they term Nebraska volleyball, and they had to find and deep in their gut the wherewithal to do it. And the refereeing in it was crazy. There were, I believe the number was there were 9 green cards, which are challenges, right? In the volleyball system, they use a green card to challenge. 9 challenges of green cards, and Nebraska was 5 for 5, or no, I think they were 5 for 6. And one of them, the one that they didn't get, they knew they weren't going to get. They were using it basically as a challenge late in the fourth set when they knew they were going to get another challenge for the fifth set. So he effectively was 100% on his challenges, which is pretty amazing.
Right. You're saying he was basically using it as a timeout.
As a timeout, right? Even though they're limited, right? You get a limited number of them unless you're right. But there was a sequence in a very important set that ultimately we won by 2 points, in which we challenged 4 different calls and we won all 4 of them. So it's 4 points right there that, in the days before challenges would not have been overturned, and the wrong call from the official would have stand. So that whole challenge process has changed the game of volleyball. It really has. But it's just a great example of endurance, perseverance from this young Nebraska volleyball team that you love to see them be put to test and then be successful, as opposed to collapsing under that pressure. Now that also led to a tremendous game the next night. They had to play back-to-back nights, Friday and Saturday night, literally like 22 hours apart. And that first game with Purdue went 5 sets, so it was almost 3 hours in length because of all those challenges and just long rallies and things of that nature, in front of a very hostile crowd, record crowd. Then they went to Indiana, another record crowd, sellout, and also struggled mightily against Indiana, but ended up winning 3-1, and had some periods of time where they were in control, but still didn't look as sharp as they did when they're at home. So it was a great weekend of struggles, but learning for a team that hasn't been on the road very much and is very young. So overall, Coach was pleased with how they responded.
Wow. Okay. I didn't hear about the Indiana game as well. But that's good to see that this young team managed to overcome this adversity. And hopefully we'll see that pay dividends when they run into even tougher opponents like Wisconsin, right, later in the season. But we'll see how, Coach uses that film, to teach them things, right? I'm sure he's going over a lot of the mistakes that they made and things like that in practice.
Oh, absolutely. Well, they had an enormous number of service errors, and I guarantee you they're going to be practicing their serve, which frankly I view as their greatest weakness. It's the thing that I think keeps them from being a real high level, a legitimate national championship threat. Is we aren't winning any national championship if we don't get to become consistently a better serving team. It's just not going to happen if we can't. So that's something they need to do.
Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye on that, of course, as they go through their season. Switching over to the Nebraska football team now. We did give our predictions on the previous podcast about the score. I was more on the optimistic side and said that we would lose, but it would be a closer game of 28-14. And you were a little bit more pessimistic and said we would lose 42-14. And then, of course, the final score ended up being worse than either of us predicted, which was 45-7. So you were definitely closer. And I believe you said that on the last podcast, this could be a coming out party for Michigan's offense, who hadn't, looked spectacular, right, in some of their earlier games this season. And, of course, they looked great against us.
They did. They could have named the score. But I tell you, it begins up front with Michigan. Their offensive line was just well schooled, just amazingly powerful. I mean, you look at their guys. I think our offensive line has guys that are 6'7", 315 pounds, 6'9", 6'10", 340 pounds, et cetera, et cetera. But then we have guys who are maybe 6'1", 295 or whatever. Every one of Michigan's offensive linemen looked the same, man. They all had just massively wide hips, powerful bodies. They were not fat. Their weight didn't include a big pot belly, and they were athletic. They could move, and I was just really, really impressed by that offensive line. And so they had all the time in the world. JJ could stay back there and do whatever the heck he wanted. And they called a very conservative but dynamic, play calling. They ran the ball, they ran it inside, they ran it outside, they ran reverses, they did a flea flicker on the first series. They did all kinds of creative things, but it was all within the framework of a fairly conservative passing game and a very powerful running game. And they were able to do whatever the heck they wanted. It was a
Right.
very impressive offensive performance.
Right. Well, and once again, something you mentioned on the previous podcast was that the TCU's 3-3-5 defense gave them some trouble in the college football semifinals, playoff semifinals last year, and they didn't run that kind of offense. They tried to throw it more. And unfortunately, this time they kind of went back to what you were saying they should have done against TCU, which is just pound the rock. And they're effective doing that against us. Having said that, for how bad the score is, when you look at the stats, it shows that it was a more competitive game than the score would say. For example, we had a total of 305 yards, while they had 436. We actually out-yarded them in terms of passing. We had 199, while they had 187. For a similar amount, we passed it 25 times, they passed it 23. Now, they had 249 yards of rushing, while we only had 106. So that's the real difference, as well as time of possession. They had it for 38 minutes. We had it for 22. And so they ran way more plays than us. But, we had, that drive near the beginning of the game, right, which resulted in us going for it on a 4th and 1 that we didn't get. So we got no points out of that. And then a different time, we had a nice drive where we kicked a field goal and missed. So really, I think we should have been closer to your 14 points that you predicted if we actually were able to convert on those red zone opportunities.
I would agree. There were some moments where we were able to have individual plays on them, some big pass plays, one big running play that made the stats look more balanced. But you take, where they were just methodical. Their average run, was probably 7 yards or something like that. And, their average pass was quite short because they didn't need to throw it deep. They did throw a couple of times deep, but for the most part, they just kept it simple, low risk, high reward for them. And here's the other thing, Alex. This is really fascinating. If you have a chance to go back and rewatch it again, something that I watched, I noticed from the very get-go. It was amazing. I was sitting with my sister, Dee Dee, and two things it jumped out at me, and I pointed them out to her. One was their running backs, because of that offensive line and its ability to dominate. Their running backs would be handed the ball by the quarterback, and then they would wait a full count, like a full second, and then they would just dart through a hole. And that was obviously coached to them. And I don't think that's necessarily something they do every week, but I think that's an adjustment they made to the 3-3-5. And I worry that other teams are going to pick up on this same adjustment. And bottom line, what it is, with a 3-3-5, you're hoping to surprise or fool, right? Trick an offensive line into committing resources to the wrong spot within the play, and then have a rusher come free from another spot, right? Because you've only got 3 down linemen, you're bringing linebackers and other players from all kinds of different spots, and you're hoping to, create matchups or concentrate, energy, if you will, into one spot where there's confusion and maybe somebody doesn't get picked up. Well, by the running back waiting that full count, waiting that second, it allows those offensive linemen to kind of get their bearings, figure out, okay, who am I supposed to block, and lock into them. Now, once they lock into them, they're a linebacker. They're maybe 220, 230 pounds, and I'm a 330-pound offensive lineman, and I'm way stronger and more powerful than them. Once I got them in my grasp, hell, they're not going anywhere, and I can just move them away, right? So the lack of having powerful defensive linemen, at least 4, really put Nebraska's line play at a big disadvantage when they were patient like that. So this idea of take the snap, be patient, let your offensive line find out where all these little linebackers are blitzing, and then pick them up and push them around. And that's what they did.
Right.
So it's really fascinating to watch.
That is a good observation. I didn't notice that watching the game live, though I would say that only works if you do have those big offensive linemen, that are well coached and everything. And Michigan's is one of, if not the best, probably we'll see all season. So I don't think everybody will be able to do that against us. But like you say, it's something to watch for.
Right. You're exactly right. Well, and again, I think down the road, our defensive coordinator will, if he sticks around and everything, will continue to pursue recruiting, and he'll try to get as many big, strong, powerful guys as he can for his defensive line, and eventually we'll have enough quality bodies that when he needs to put 4 guys on the defensive line or even 5 guys on the defensive line, he'll be able to do that.
Yeah. One of the things I want to mention was just how it was kind of a weird game in certain ways, right? Like you'll recall that I believe it was on our second offensive play, Harburg went back to pass, threw it. It got tipped up in the air by one of their linemen and came down right in the hands of a Michigan guy. So we had a turnover right in, great field position for them right away in the game. And then later on, they had a crazy drive where they threw a long ball and the dude literally caught the ball from behind our guy's helmet and pinned the ball against his helmet and fell down on top of him and stuff. So there were just some kind of like weird, freaky plays,
Well, and then there was a punt. There was a muffed punt, right? Do you remember the muffed punt? There's a muffed punt by their punt receiver.
Yes.
And the damn ball bounces perfectly for him to catch it again. What are the chances of that? That happens 10 times. And with the what they used to call the oblong spheroid football, right? It's not going to bounce straight back up. It's going to bounce sideways. It's going to bounce behind him. It's going to bounce forward. But what does it do? It bounces right up in the air, stays right where he is. He's able to catch it on the rebound and almost runs back a touchdown.
Right. He had a good return there. That was another weird one. And we had a guy coming right towards him, but actually he was maybe coming a little too fast because he got there before the punt arrived. And so he had to kind of like go to left to not hit the guy early. And then the ball bounces up, he gets it, and then he just goes, right? Because with that guy not there, now he has a room to run.
Right.
So yeah,
exactly.
It
was just crazy.
Yeah. So just some of those sorts of things definitely went their way, but that was our only turnover of the game. We did fumble it a few times, but we always fell on it before they could recover. So in those ways, we did some good things, and Harburg, who was once again the quarterback because Jeff Sims is still recovering from his injury. Harburg was dinged up at the end of the previous game, but apparently it was not a serious injury, and he was still the most healthy guy we could put on the field. And I know this was a tough game for him, and we knew it would be for whichever quarterback it was, because Michigan's defense is really good. He got sacked 4 times. And I saw him kind of talking to Rule on the sidelines several times on the TV, after we would, miss a third down play or whatever. But he is a sophomore. He's still learning. So I'm not too harsh on him, for his kind of mediocre performance in this game.
Yeah, and actually from the stadium standpoint, I just really couldn't blame a whole lot of that on him, right? Like the quarterback, his quarterback play wasn't the reason we weren't successful. There were other reasons that were way more important to the outcome of that game. But here's the thing that I came away, I was thrilled about 2 things. Number one, we did score a touchdown. So we scored some points, which I did not want to get skunked. Being a Michigander, I would have never heard the end of it.
Great run by Joshua Fleeks, 74-yard run.
Yes. Who converted to running back just a couple of weeks ago because of our other injuries, right? He came to us as a wide receiver from Baylor. So he's actually one kid who had played for Coach Rule when he was the coach at Baylor, because this is a 5th year for him. He's taking advantage of the COVID season. So Joshua Fleeks, was approached and immediately said, "Yes, I'll do whatever you need, Coach," and has taken one for the team, and apparently has really embraced it and is doing quite well. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of number 11 in the future, especially if our starter continues to make mental mistakes that get him put to the sidelines.
Right. Anthony Grant had another fumble that was thankfully recovered by one of our guys, but not a fine moment for him.
Well, and I think he also had like a penalty as well, if I remember correctly. So, but anyway, I think we're just going to see more of Mr. Fleeks in the future. So watch for that. But here's my takeaway. My takeaway is, okay, we were completely outclassed by this team. It is what it is. Okay. We need to watch that tape once, learn what we can learn, burn it, and never look at it again. Okay. We've got to quickly turn the page, obviously, since we play on a Friday against Illinois. But you now look at the scores of those kinds of teams that we have to play yet. Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Northwestern. Those are all games we're capable of winning. I don't look on anybody left on our schedule except with the exception of maybe Maryland and say, oh my gosh, they're so much better than us. We don't have a chance. Like that will take a Herculean effort by our team to beat that team, right? Every other team that we have on our schedule, we can play with, I believe.
Even Wisconsin?
Even Wisconsin. I mean, they haven't been overwhelming. It's not like they're, clicking on every cylinder. Now, I will concede that we could lose them all. Absolutely. We could lose them all. And I don't know how many we'll be favored in, frankly. But I believe that if we don't just keep losing 2 starters every damn week, like we seem to be doing, we have enough talent and our defense is playing hard enough. And I think our defense is good enough in terms of how we're approaching things that'll keep us in most games. Our offense actually showed some signs of a passing game against Michigan, a pretty good defense. So if we could now put together the running game we saw the previous 2 weeks with the passing game moments that we saw in this game, we might start seeing an offense that starts to come together.
There we go.
So there's a very optimistic view.
All right. I like your positivity. There are 2 more things I want to touch on. One is in terms of special teams and specifically field goal kicking, because I was undecided as of last week, but as of this game, I am 100% on the train that we have a field goal problem, because now I believe we've made 1 and missed like 3, and those 3 were all like very makeable, like in the 30-yard range,
30 to 40.
So yeah, we had another very, it was at a bit of an angle, but it was very makeable in terms of distance, and it was a miss again. So both,
Yep.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but both Tristan Alvano and Timmy Bleakroad have both had tries and had disappointments so far this year, which is a bummer because I believe it was Tristan, the younger guy. We saw videos of him in practice, right, making like 50-yarders, consistently, or at least, a few in a row during a practice or whatever. So I thought he might be a real difference maker for us. But maybe it's, the pressure of actually doing it in a game day environment, right? He is a freshman. I'm not sure that he's attuned himself to that yet.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I think he is struggling with the pressure that's associated with kicking field goals in the Big Ten, and in an environment where it matters this much. Now, one of the reasons he was given a scholarship is because in his high school senior season he was phenomenal, including kicking 5 field goals, including like ones that were big 40 yard plus even 50-yard field goals on that stadium for the state championship. I mean, he effectively won the state championship for his high school, and it was phenomenal. So he's got the leg strength. He's got the history of success at the high school level. He's just struggling with the adjustment to the pressure of doing it. But I will tell you, even during practice, like before the game, and then more specifically at halftime, when the kickers come out early after halftime to get a few swings in before
Right.
second half starts, and he was atrocious. I mean, he missed 30-yarders. He boinked. He missed badly on 2 of 4 40-yarders, and he boinked one that was in maybe 30-yarder off of the goalpost.
Right.
And you know what? When you're kicking with no pressure, no nothing, just practicing, you should be able to, that's like a free throw, man. A 30-yarder, you should be able to make 97 out of 100, right?
Right.
With no pressure. And he was not there.
Right.
So he's clearly got some mental issues he's dealing with.
Yeah. Well, and how kickers are, right? They can be superstitious and kind of get in their own
Mm-hmm.
heads, right? If they're on a streak of
Mm-hmm.
missing.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that, maybe we get an opportunity for like a real simple one, like 20-yarder, right in the middle of the field, to give him a little bit of confidence, to get his head back on straight.
Exactly. I really think that's what it is. He just needs to get some confidence, to believe in himself again, and he's going to be fine because his leg strength is there. I mean, the distance isn't the issue for what he's doing.
Right. And then my second point, and I think we'll have to turn this into like a catchphrase or something, who's the quarterback going to be, make it a little game show thing. Cause that's been a topic on each of our podcasts, but Harburg was once again the starter in this game. Well, and we don't know exactly who's going to be the starter in the Illinois game, but like you said, he missed some passes in this game, but also made some nice ones, for that more medium length, like a good 20-yard pass sort of thing. And we did get some good yardage against the very good Michigan defense. So let's presume for a moment that Jeff Sims has recovered enough that he could play in the Illinois game. Do you start Jeff Sims at this point in the season? We're basically at the halfway point now. Or do you stick with the guy who's been getting you through these games so far?
Wow. See, yeah, now I think this is the important stretch run, right? Like this is where we've got to make some hay. So if Heinrich Harburg is healthy enough, I think I have to go with him as my starter. Now, I might tell Jeff Sims, okay, you know what? You're looking better in practice now. Your ankle is healed enough. You are now full go, and you need to know that I could pull the trigger and put you in at any moment, and I need you right by my side the whole game. Right, I want you right there, to be ready to step in. Okay, and then as soon as Harburg struggles to either make decisions quickly enough and ends up getting sacked, or does some other quarterback technique errors. I mean, you can't blame him when he gets blindsided, right? Like that's just not fair. But when he struggles to catch a snap, or does other mental mistakes that are quarterback related, then you have a quarterback to just send in there immediately and let Harburg watch from the sidelines for a while. But I think he has to be your starter now until further notice.
Right. And, I if I'm recalling correctly, I do think he did, like, either he or the running back, kind of messed up a handoff at one point in this Michigan game. But he has done the most important thing for me over the course of these 3 games, which is not turn the ball over like crazy, right? Like Jeff Sims was in the first 2 games. And I totally agree with you. I've been kind of pro Harburg this whole season. And so I think,
You have.
I think even if Jeff Sims is healthy at this point, you stick with the guy who's been working for you so far, doing a solid job, and is a sophomore, right, has more room potential to grow perhaps than Jeff Sims does. But at the same time, if Sims is healthy enough that you're ready to play him, you're not afraid to swap quarterbacks mid-game if things are going well with Harburg, because that has been a feature, right? In our previous 2 wins, we kind of had slow starts on the offense, but then it got going later on in the game. So maybe if it is another slow start against Illinois, maybe you do bring Jeff Sims in to try to spice it up, and just hope he doesn't throw a pick.
Right. Well, but here's a couple of things that I'll be keeping a very close eye on with Harburg. And I don't think I'm going out of school here like, oh, gee, Illinois didn't notice this until this loser on a Nebraska podcast mentioned it. But Harburg, I swear, throws sidearm. Okay. The
Mm-hmm.
reason why Michigan was able to like knock down 3 or 4 balls with Harburg is he does not throw over his shoulder, right? You watch his arm motion, and at first I thought it was he was doing that by design because he was adjusting to the player in front of him. But then as I've watched him play more and more in these last 3 games, it's apparent to me that his natural arm motion is very low. It's almost sidearm, and I'm afraid that that is not a good thing to have happen. He needs to get that corrected because other teams have absolutely noticed that. And I guarantee you, every defensive line from here on out is going to be putting their hands up a lot, right? Like they're going to be making that an emphasis in their preparation for Nebraska. And we're going to see a lot more knockdown balls unless Heinrich gets that fixed.
I don't remember the exact play, but there was one in this Michigan game where he definitely had a weird throwing motion, like he was off his back foot. I think one of his legs kind of came up and he, chucked it with his arm more than anything else. But he got the ball to the receiver. So the announcer was kind of like, that is poor fundamentals, but he got the job done, so that's something he's definitely still learning. Throwing isn't his strong suit, right? It's running. So I think he's still developing that sense.
Well, and he's got that high school creativity mentality where he's just like using his athleticism to just get the ball there one way or another. But the fact is that those kinds of things that you could get away with in high school, you just can't get away with them in college. The preparation is too good by the coaches on the other side. The athletes are too good. And if you do that sort of stuff, it'll eventually burn you more than it's going to help you.
Right.
Okay. And Harburg has got to learn that he can't just do that stuff.
Yep.
And so that I could see that being a thing that gets him right back to the bench right quick. Okay. And then here's the other thing I will say that's unrelated to the quarterback, and then I'll be done with this game. And that is that, when I'm actually able to attend the game, and we were able to watch it from an end zone, so you can kind of see lineups. You can see the alignment of the teams before the snap. And I on 7 plays out of 7 times, so I was 7 for 7. I watched Michigan line up, and I was able to tell my sister exactly who was going to get the ball, and every time I was right. and it was based on alignment. I could see what the quarterback was seeing. Our defensive linemen, our defensive backs, in my opinion, are giving away basically an inside slant and slash cross, basically crossing the field. They would just run these receivers and literally bring them all the way across the field. They'd be lined up on the wide right, and they would come across to the left, and the quarterback would throw the ball to them. Then they would be wide open with our defensive back trailing them by 3 to 4 yards. And it happened over and over and over again. And it was so obvious every time that they lined up which one they were going to because of the way our defense lined up. And it drove me nuts because I said, I think this is what's going to happen. And then I'd do it. And it would play out, and Didi would just look at me like, how the hell do you know that? And it was obvious, you know what I mean? Like you could see the alignment was not right. And so I hope that gets fixed.
All right. Pete Schmidt's defensive coordinator. I like it.
There you go.
All right.
Well, we got some alignment issues, I guess is my point.
Yes. Now talking about the next game, like you said, it's against Illinois, who was quite had a pretty good season last year from what I recall, but aren't doing as well this time around. They are 2-3 like us, have the same record. They beat Toledo early in the year by 2 points, then lost to Kansas, lost to Penn State, then beat Florida Atlantic, and then most recently, last week, got beat pretty bad by Purdue, 44-19. I watched a highlights replay of that game, and my big takeaway was that Purdue was getting a lot of sacks on them. So I think our 3-3-5, more aggressive defense can definitely take advantage of that. And they also had a defensive sack that turned into a fumble touchdown. The guy just picked it up and went back for a touchdown. So the defense helped score some of those points. But Illinois also made a 53-yard field goal in that game. So they, unlike us, are not struggling in the field goal department. It's an away game for us, and it is on a Friday, so both teams have less time to prepare than usual. But I think this is a critical game. It's coming at the midpoint of our season. If we win it, we'll be 3-3, right in that kind of mid-road area, versus 2-4, right? That's kind of a big difference to me. So to kick off this next section of our season, like you say, which does have plenty of winnable games, very easily losable, but also winnable, I think it's important that we win, that we prove the odd makers wrong. They think that Illinois is a 4-point favorite, but I think that if we our defense comes to play, make some adjustments from that tough fight against Michigan, and then Harburg is able to use his arm more, like we saw in that Michigan game, as well as us being able to establish more of a running game, I think we can win this game.
Well, I sure hope we can. I agree. It is a must win for Nebraska's season to go and end on a positive note that may lead us to the 6 wins we would hope to achieve to be bowl eligible. This is a must win, and it's a tough situation. I will concede. I mean, short week, coming off of a brutal beating by Michigan, where they beat us down. We're down 2 defensive starters. So, I mean, you start looking and doing the math on the number of players we've lost and that are no longer playing for us. This season has been devastating from that standpoint. But if I look at it from an offensive standpoint, I feel like, okay, we have a chance to start to find some rhythm on offense if we just keep plugging away and stay committed to what the coaches are trying to do. And I like their movement to more of a power running game. I think that's still the right thing to do, even with the loss of some running backs. I like the emergence of this Fleeks kid as an alternative, second string running back, whatever you want to call him. So I like what we could be, but I do not want to understate. This is a must win. We have to find a way to win this game. Now I'm telling you, I'm a big believer in Illinois' head coach. He's a tough-minded dude. He plays basic football, and he plays it very well. Now, he did lose a great defensive coordinator and a ton of talent that were mature last year, and so now he's had to replace a bunch of them, and they haven't yet done that. So they're not the team they were a year ago, but they have talent. They have athletes that match us in ways that not a lot of other Big Ten West schools have. So it's not going to be an easy one. That your comment about this field goal kicker scares the daylights out of me, because I really think it's a field goal game, and that doesn't bode well for us, does it?
No, it does not. Though if I was the offensive coordinator to pair with your defensive coordinator on that 4th and 1 I mentioned earlier in the Michigan game, I personally would not have called a timeout or tried to do anything tricky. I would have just lined up and done a QB sneak and had everybody push the quarterback, and we would have gotten that first down and maybe gotten a touchdown on that drive. So if it's a 4th and short, I think and we're feeling good about our running game, I think we're in a situation where we go for it because we don't trust our field goal kickers. So maybe that works to our advantage. We'll have to see.
That's a great take, Alex. That's a great take. Seriously.
All right.
You're right. That might motivate us. And I totally agree with you that I think the screw up in that sequence was we called a timeout. And we called it because we didn't get out of the huddle in time. Not because the coaches wanted to or that was their plan all along. They called it because they had to, or we would have taken a.
You think? To me, it looked like they were doing that thing where we rushed up to the line, and then we were trying to draw them off sides, right? Get the penalty to get the automatic first down. That's what it looked like to me.
Well, it's possible, certainly, that's the approach, and maybe when I watch it, on TV, I'll see more of that. But the reaction from the players and everything like that seemed to lead me to believe that, because they didn't come out of the huddle until quite late, and there was only a few seconds left, and so they kind of were forced to call the timeout, like there was confusion in some regard. I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe that was all planned and supposedly a coordinated effort to try to get them to draw off sides. But even that, I don't. That's a terrible idea. At that point, line up and get the damn first down.
Right. Yeah, that was my thought because the previous play was like a 3rd and 4, I think, or something like that. So you had to kind of. My thought would be, okay, if we run it, we're going for running play. If we don't get it, if it's 4th and short, we're gonna do this, guys. We're gonna do this QB sneak. Just line up there and go do it. Yeah, don't give them the time to think about it right on a timeout. So let's hope we see that be executed in the proper way in this Illinois game. I'm going to go ahead and give a prediction here and say that we win. I think it'll be a close game, probably a more defensive one. I don't think it'll be super high scoring because I think our defense will be able to slow them down. But I'll say that we end up winning, let's say 21-17.
Okay, I'm in agreement with you on everything you said. I'm also gonna go with the Husker victory because, as I've said, it's must win. We have to win this game. We got to find a way. So I'm going to say we win it. Geesh, let's say 28-24 because we go for it on a 4th down and we end up getting a touchdown instead of a field goal.
I like it. So, switching now to the national discussion in terms of week 5 of college football. One interesting thing I saw news wise, it was somebody related to Clemson. I forget if it was a donor or something along those lines or someone in the program. But basically, they said to somebody in the media, like, be on the lookout for news very soon, and things are definitely moving, basically, in terms of them leaving the ACC for the SEC. Which has been rumored for quite some time. Them and Florida State both being interested in leaving the ACC, even though the ACC now has added some new schools from the Pac-12. So, nothing concrete, but we'll definitely keep an eye on that.
Yeah. If Clemson can do that, right? If they can get out of that grant of rights setup, they won't be the only ones that leave.
Right.
And what's a head scratcher to me is if there was inklings of this, why did Stanford and Cal, and SMU join? I mean, I guess I understand why those three they had no other options that were apparent, but I gotta believe that Stanford had to have had at least some conversations with either the Big 12 or the Big 10 that said if you were willing to come in at a lesser amount, as not a full share for some extended period of time, that they could have joined one of those leagues. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels odd to me. I don't know. I feel like there's a piece of information that we're missing, right? And that's going to come out at some point here, and then it's going to be like, well, of course, that's why, But I don't know what it is. But this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Right. I mean, yeah, those athletic directors at those schools know that the ACC is on shaky ground too, but the same could have been said about the Big 12, right? So, you don't quite know how the winds of change will play out in the world of college football.
Right.
Now talking about the week 5 games, one that we predicted was Notre Dame versus Duke, which my younger sister happened to go attend because it was at home for Duke. And I predicted that Notre Dame would win 38-28, while you predicted that Duke would win 24-17. And then the final score ended up being a lower scoring game, Notre Dame winning 21-14. Watching the highlights of that game, frankly, I would be very sad and disappointed if I was a Duke fan because because they were up by 1 point, and it was 4th and 16 at midfield with 50 seconds left. So if they stop Notre Dame on that 4th and 16 play, they win the game by 1 point. But they give it up, of course, and then they soon get a touchdown to win the game. But frankly, Duke kind of played better for the majority.
Yes. And their defense was, doing its job. And I would be so angry. I am, even though I'm not a Duke fan. I'm angry at those coaches I'm angry at all coaches that use prevent defenses.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't give a damn what the computers tell you or the statistics tell you or whatever. That is inhuman to do what you just did to those kids. They've been playing hard. They've been doing all their right thing. Now, is it okay to maybe go with a more conservative play call where you're not blitzing or whatever? But you do not go into some stupid prevent where not only do you only rush 3 guys, but you also drop back, the other 8 um, so deep that you're effectively giving up that first down zone. You're making it easy for all the receivers and stuff to get to that
Right.
first down distance without being bumped, delayed, challenged in any way, shape, or form. And when you're a defender, what are you always doing versus an offensive player? The offensive player is acting, and the defensive player must react. And that difference is always going to give the the offensive player an advantage. In this case, it didn't come down to that. It was the quarterback who was able to basically run wild on that play and get the yardage he needed because everybody else was so far downfield.
Right.
And once he got a gap on those 3 guys that were rushing, he had the whole damn field to run.
Right. Well, and the highlights didn't show all the plays in that drive, of course, but to get it to 4th and 16, right, you had to have, gotten some tackles for loss or a sack before then. So you were getting some aggression in there, and then you go
Absolutely.
full prevent on the most important play, right? Like, what's the logic there?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I would just, I'm just so angry.
All right.
It's just disgusting. Disgusting.
The other game that we gave a prediction for was LSU versus Ole Miss. I predicted that Ole Miss would win in a close game, 33-30. Well, you predicted that LSU would win, that Brian Kelly would bounce back and win 31-24. It ended up being a pretty crazy game. No defense being played by either team, but it was a final score with Ole Miss winning at home, 55-49.
Jeez. Yep. Yeah, that is wild. And you got to wonder what's going on with the coaches at LSU because they, they knew they have some talent. They're good coaches. They've been successful in their past, and this is a game that they needed to win. But that shows you that Ole Miss has got some real talent, right? But then that's the difference between LSU and Alabama.
Yep. Well, and Ole Miss played it pretty close with Alabama, so I felt pretty good about picking them at home. Although LSU, after Ole Miss scored near the end of the game, LSU was driving it, and it was they threw a Hail Mary into the touchdown, into the end zone rather, at the very last play of the game. So LSU drove down and was in position where if they scored, they would get 7 points. They would have won the game. So it was not a done deal by any means, but it was Mizzou was up 31-28 at halftime. So it just goes to show you how crazy the scoring was, and quite the contrast to me from past years of the SEC, right, where they were known for having very good defenses, and being a little bit more like the Big Ten, right, in terms of maybe lower scoring. But I feel like this season we've been seeing more kind of Pac-12 numbers out of the SEC.
Right. Well, and that's just maybe evolution of the game a little bit, and the pendulum swinging between who's got the advantage, the offense or the defense. And we'll see what that looks like in 2 or 3 years.
Very true. Another interesting game was Oregon State versus Utah. I don't know that we talked about that game much on the previous podcast because it seemed like Utah would win. It was at home for Oregon State, but Utah is, of course, the 2-time defending Pac-12 champion. But Oregon State ended up winning that game 21-7. It was actually 21-0 in the fourth quarter. Utah's score kind of came when the game was already out of their hands. So a very impressive win for Oregon State. I believe Utah did go for it on like 4th down a couple times and then like didn't get it. So that might be where some of their lack of points came from. But yeah, big win for that program.
Yeah, I would say. And one I certainly didn't see, even though Oregon State, had a very good year last year and was expected to be good this year. I just have such great respect for Utah and their program. I was a little surprised.
Yeah. And then this was another big game, USC versus Colorado. After Colorado just got shellacked by Oregon the previous week, they had to play at home for Colorado against USC. And USC went up early and looked like it was going to be kind of a similar story to the Oregon game, kind of a smooth sailing ride. They were up 48 to 21, so they had a 27-point lead with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. But despite that, the final score ended up being 48 to 41, with USC only winning by 7 points. Colorado made a big comeback in the fourth quarter, and USC didn't get any points in the fourth quarter. So you'll recall that Lincoln Riley chose not to fire his defensive coordinator there at USC at the end of last season, which I think befuddled both of us. And I think it's befuddling fans out here in LA as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's just the mentality thing, right? I'm sorry. Football games are 60 minutes long. You cannot, even if you have been the superior team for the first 3 quarters, you cannot start to coast and think you've got it won. Those guys were all hot dogging and celebrating and feeling like, man, we can do whatever we want. And it's not that way. It's just not that way. You have to play for 60 minutes and you have to have the mental fortitude to hang in there, even when you're having great success, and remain focused. And USC proved they didn't have that.
Especially when it's against a team that has a deep ball, right? Like their quarterback can throw it, has proven it in past games, and that they can make up points quick if you let them, right? If you put the foot off the gas.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a crazy one, but USC ended up winning that one. And then a couple other interesting ones. Georgia was tested quite strongly by Auburn. That was a home game for Auburn, and Georgia ended up winning that game 27-20. Georgia had 2 turnovers in the first half, so kind of uncharacteristic on their part that they fumbled the ball, kind of gave Auburn some opportunities, which I think helped them go up earlier in the game. But Georgia kind of, took control later on into the fourth quarter and managed to pull that one out, but definitely a scare for Kirby Smart.
Right. Well, and they're learning how hard it is to stay on the top of that mountain, even when you have incredible talent and frankly superior talent to almost everyone you play. That you still have to find that internal fortitude and commitment to play the game again for 60 minutes every week.
Very true.
And it's hard to do. It's hard to do.
Yep. Just ask Nick Saban.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. He'll tell you about it, and he'll spend 2 hours giving you the details.
Yeah, about his gray hairs, I'm sure. And then this was another interesting upset. Kentucky beat Florida 33-14. It was at home for Kentucky, and they have a player named Roy Davis who had a stellar game. He ran for 280 yards against Florida.
I'm sorry, 280 yards running?
Yep.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yep. He's a big boy, hard to tackle kind of guy. That's what I saw from the highlights.
Wow. I may have to watch that one in replay as well. That's impressive.
Yeah. That was a fun one to watch the highlights of. Now getting to week 6 of college football, there are a few big games of note, besides obviously the Nebraska game, which is most important. And the biggest one of all is Oklahoma versus Texas, the Red River Shootout. I just learned from Googling it earlier that apparently I knew about the Red River rivalry name, but it's also called the Red River Showdown instead of Shootout. That's another name for it, but I prefer rivalry to showdown myself. So
it will always be the Shootout.
Well, right. Shootout is obviously the best, but if we're ranking them, to me, it would go Shootout, Rivalry, Showdown myself.
Gotcha.
But It's interesting. In recent years, I'd say the last decade or so, Oklahoma has always been the favorite in this game. It feels like, because Texas has been kind of down, but now Texas is ranked number three rather, and Oklahoma's ranked 12th. So Texas is kind of the more proven team going into this game. Oklahoma is undefeated, but they haven't played nearly as tough of a schedule as Texas has. Of course, they beat Alabama, and then they beat Kansas this past weekend pretty solidly, 40-14. So I think the wins are at Texas' back, but do you think Oklahoma can upset them?
Oh, they're certainly capable of catching them, but they are not going to be easy, right? Like it's going to be Texas is the more talented team. They've got the quarterback that's playing better, all that sort of stuff. But Oklahoma could definitely do it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I'm the coach there at Oklahoma. He was that defensive coordinator from Clemson, right? Who's now at
Yes.
Oklahoma.
Well, and he was the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma as well.
Right. Right. And he kind of had a bit of a mixed year last year.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. Like I said, Oklahoma, they've played a few teams so far, but definitely nobody on the level of Texas so far, whereas Texas had to play Alabama. So for that reason, I'm kind of leaning towards Texas, even though obviously not a big fan of either team, coming from the Nebraska perspective, but I think Texas has proven it on the field more so far. And you know that they'll be focused because they've lost Oklahoma a lot in these recent years. So it'll feel very sweet if they're able to get their revenge, I think.
I would agree with all those things, but I can never pick Texas. Therefore, I'm going to pick Oklahoma.
All right.
And say that they're going to find a way to win that game, but it'll be close, and Oklahoma will win the game, but close.
All right. What's your score then?
Oh dear. You know what? It's going to have to be a pretty good defensive game for Oklahoma to win it. I don't think that Oklahoma wins a shootout. So I'm going to say 24-21 Oklahoma.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I think I'm going to say it will be a shootout. It will be high offense, as we're kind of used to for those teams. And that Texas will win, though I think it will be close. I think Oklahoma will hang in there for sure. So let's say it ends up being 42 Texas to 35 Oklahoma.
Okay, that's pretty good.
And then another game that I wanted to do a prediction for, because it's two teams that are pretty evenly matched, at least according to their rankings, is LSU versus Missouri. It is at home for Missouri. They're ranked 21, while LSU is ranked 23. And LSU obviously coming off of the loss to Ole Miss, the high-scoring game we were just talking about. So the question is, does Missouri at home manage to beat a LSU team that's probably disappointed with its recent performances?
I say the answer is no.
Okay.
I think LSU still has too much talent. As you pointed out, LSU was basically driving with a chance to win against Ole Miss and has actually played well in stretches this season. And I just think they're more talented. So I say it's an LSU victory.
Okay.
What say you?
Well, I was just looking at Missouri's schedule here because I was curious.
Missouri had one bigger surprising win, like they beat somebody they weren't supposed to early in the season. I do remember that, but I can't remember who it was.
It must be Kansas State because they beat them 30 to
that's who it was.
27. Yeah, and their other games haven't been against as formidable of opponents. So kind of similar to what we were just talking about with Texas, Oklahoma, right? LSU has definitely played the tougher schedule so far. Now they've been kind of beat up and bruised because of it, right? They've taken some L's, but they have kind of gone through the fire, whereas Mizzou hasn't so far. LSU's probably the toughest team they've faced, other than Kansas State, right? Who seems like they're a bit down this year.
No, Kansas State's not down this year.
You don't think so?
No, I don't.
Okay.
You'll have to do some research on them. I've watched them play. They look pretty good.
Okay, very
Uh,
good.
I mean, I don't even know what their record is, but I'm going to tell you, I don't think K State's down.
Fair enough. Um, well, and I think I'm gonna go. I'll go since it's up once again the home game, right? That stadium's gonna be rocking for Missouri. Um,
It will
so,
be.
so I think I'm gonna be a little contrarian and say that Mizzou manages to narrowly win. Probably another high scoring game based on that Ole Miss game. Um, let's say that they managed to win. Um, let's say 38-35 over LSU.
Okay. Well, you know what? If your prediction comes true, I'm going to make a prediction based on your prediction, which is that if they do, there will be countless articles nationally, even on ESPN and SEC Network and stuff, asking the question, "What's wrong with LSU?" Because that there's an expectation that losing to Missouri will not meet for them.
You think that'll put some serious pressure on Brian Kelly if he loses this game?
No, I don't think he's at risk of losing his job or anything, but it will begin the national dialogue that might very well lead to that in next year or the year after that. If because that's the kind of crap that Nebraska has gone through and is now on the bottom side of that, trying to fight their way back up through that glass ceiling, and that is once you get to a certain point of losses like that, and you're not performing and you're underperforming in games people expect you to win, all of a sudden the recruits have a different perspective of you, and it's a little harder to get transfer portal guys to choose you and that sort of thing. It'll start affecting their ability to recruit.
Okay, that's a good observation. Now, what's your score prediction for LSU?
Well, I said they would win.
You did.
I agree with you. It's going to be high scoring. Um, what was the numbers that you came up with? 40,
I said 38-35.
38, 35. Okay. I'm going to go a little lower than that. I'm going to say LSU wins 38-28.
Very good. We'll see how that goes. And then in terms of the other games of week 6, I'd say those are the kind of the two biggest ones. Georgia is playing against Kentucky, right? So Georgia just narrowly beating Auburn and Kentucky
Oh,
having beaten
wow.
Florida. But it is
Yeah.
at home for Georgia. And my expectation would be that Kirby Smart will use the kind of close call against Auburn to get the guys focused and come against Kentucky with a stronger game plan. So that's kind of my prediction. I think Georgia will win that. Not like blowout, but they'll win it pretty solidly.
I am going to agree with you. It probably wasn't a great thing for Kentucky's chances that Georgia struggled last week in their minds against Auburn.
Right. Yeah, I would generally agree with that. Another interesting one is Alabama against Texas A&M. It's at home for Texas A&M. So once again, one that Alabama should be able to win, but Alabama has been, a little more vulnerable this year, and I believe they have lost to Texas A&M in recent years, once or twice before. So
They have.
that could be a potential upset.
It could be, but I just don't. I don't have a lot of confidence in A&M. But yeah, it was just a couple years ago actually that A&M was the team that upset Alabama in the regular season in a game where Alabama was expected to win. Um, and A&M has talent. There's no doubt about that. I just don't think they've brought it together. And Alabama is struggling because their quarterback is struggling. And I just have a feeling at some point that's going to start to click for Alabama, and they're gonna really take a step up. So I'm going to predict an Alabama victory there, even though I do acknowledge the history, and frankly, it wouldn't crush my feelings if Alabama lost.
Oh, I'm sure you'd be shedding what do they call that? Like a lizard's tear,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. You'd be
exactly.
so sad about that. Um, And this is an interesting one. The Pac-12 has been quite interesting this year. Even though they are dissolving as a conference and going to be the Pac-2 starting next year, a lot of their teams have done well and looked impressive. On the national stage so far. Like Washington having those impressive wins. We've talked about Oregon, USC. Although maybe USC's defense isn't looking the best, but their offense is as good as ever. And Washington, that same team, played against Arizona this past weekend, and they won, but it was close, 31-24. They won over Arizona. And now that same Arizona team is playing against USC. It is at home for USC, but I think that's another one where there's a potential upset if USC's defense, doesn't get the memo, during practice this week and puts their foot off the gas in the fourth quarter like they did against Colorado, right? Maybe Arizona is able to take advantage of that.
Yep, that's a possibility. I don't think it's going to happen. I think USC's coaches and players have learned a lesson from what happened last week, and it's playing at home this week. They're not going to have that letdown.
Well, I'll agree with you that the playing at home versus it was an away game against Colorado, that definitely makes a difference. But in terms of the defensive thing, that's been their problem all last year too, and then into this year. So how many times do you keep making the same mistakes and not being able to correct them? Right? I think at some point you have to point the finger at the coaching staff on that.
Oh, well, right. And exactly. And just the culture too. Like,
right.
Do you have the mental toughness to take care of this?
Yeah. But what are your kind of thoughts, I guess, on the Pac-12's performance this year? Have you also kind of been struck by how they're doing well, despite the fact that, the conference is kind of falling apart?
Absolutely. And it's really, I think it's quite a statement that to be made about where college football is in that western part of the country. And we'll find out if changing conferences, which obviously many of them have done, is going to dramatically change that problem. I mean, fundamentally, if you look at it, they don't have a talent acquisition problem, right? I mean, you look at the number of schools that are doing well, including historic, road tread like Oregon State, right? Who just had their huge upset victory over Utah. I mean, every one of those teams is filled with talent. They've got players, and those players are playing at a high level, which suggests they've got pretty good coaching too, which means that they probably have pretty decent facilities to coach those players, right? So all of those things are in place. So what's missing? What caused the Pac-12 to not ultimately have the success they needed to sustain themselves? And the answer is butts in the seats and eyeballs on the TV, right? It's the apathy and the indifference, frankly, that the Pac-12 schools and their alumni have regarding sports in general. And rather than attacking that issue, they blamed it on all kinds of other stuff. And that's the part that just blows me away. They had everything they needed to be successful as a conference and sustain themselves. In fact, most people a few years ago would have pointed to the Big 12 and said they were the ones on shaky ground, not the Pac-12. And it all boils down to leadership and specifically addressing what your real problem is. And instead, they hide behind the excuse that, well, there's just so much to do out here in California. There's so much to do in the Pacific Northwest, and that's why we don't have strong attendance. And I always called BS on that, and that is ultimately what caused them to fail. And they hid the excuse.
I think your argument there definitely applies to the in-person attendance in the stadiums for sure. In terms of the TV eyeballs, I think part of the blame also has to go to the Pac-12 themselves, right? Because they tried to push their Pac-12 network, and their own streaming things, but then kind of mismanaged those and were able to make them succeed in the way, the Big Ten Network or the SEC was able to do.
Right.
And, when you make it harder to watch, or, the product that you receive is of subpar quality, right, then the fans don't watch, as it turns out, or not in the same numbers
Right.
that you need.
Exactly, and again, that gets back to leadership, right? The people at the and the leadership did not have the awareness, expertise, whatever you want to say, to recognize that they needed a partner who understood the broadcast business. They did not respect the expertise and talent of broadcast partners, and so they said, no, 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 we want the whole pie. We don't want a 50-50 network with an ESPN or a Fox Sports. We want the whole pie because
Right.
we think we can, we can do your job and do it at least as well as you can. And they learned they can't.
Right. My last little anecdote is perhaps a teaser for a more thorough discussion at the end of the season, because this is a big topic. But I'm curious to see in these upcoming years, as the conference realignment shakes out, and these other teams settle in their new homes, like USC and UCLA in the Big Ten, Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC. Do they have to adjust their traditional play styles to their new environment? Or, do they kind of shake up that environment and the conference has to kind of adjust them? Famously, Scott Frost kind of taking his, know-how that he learned at Oregon as a coordinator previously at the start of Nebraska. He was kind of trying to make the conference change to him, going with the more spread offense style and, these more kind of aggressive offensive philosophies that he'd learned out in the Pac-12, and then he ran to the brick wall of the Big Ten, right? And the way defenses played here, and he kind of had to adjust to that. So I'm curious, how that worked for Lincoln Riley and USC, how they have to adjust to that, or will it work for them?
Right. Well, and again, I think that's a very multifaceted question, like you say. That is at least one podcast all on its own to talk about things like,
Yes.
because it's a combination of talent acquisition. It's a combination of recognizing the kind of weather that you might be playing in the future that you didn't historically have to play in as a West Coast school, as well as the mental fortitude that your team has to possess to be able to win in a conference where everyone has the money, everyone has good coaches. They are all making wise and insightful adjustments to what you're doing. They're taking away what you do best, and you better have a second and a third gear, or you're going to be in trouble, right? And that's where Big Ten schools often get muddied because they're able to do that, right? And so no one develops that high level skill because that gets taken away by the excellence of the coaching staffs and these universities. But for one game, you can get away with that stuff, which is why the Pac-12 has often had good success against the Big Ten, for example, in bowl games, because for one game, typically in an environment that's much more conducive to what the kind of weather that they play in every game or most games, they were more prepared for that than a Big Ten school that has developed its culture and its structure around the reality that, like Nebraska, had to play against Michigan on a day when the wind was gusting to 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour, and it was kind of shifty. And it wasn't a day where either team was going to have a great deal of success throwing the football.
You just made me think, because you and Mom took an extended stay at Bullhead City in Arizona for a while, and it was very windy there when I came to visit you. So you just made me think of, oh, what would it be like to play a football game there? Talk about winds affecting the game.
Yeah, no doubt. You're exactly right. You're
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah. So, like we say, that'll definitely be a topic we touch on more later in the year as the season kind of winds down, because it'll be a fascinating thing to watch in the new world of college football in 2024.
Yep. I agree.
All right. Well, we hope you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast. If you did, you can reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also search for us on Apple Podcasts. You can rate and review us there. You can leave a comment and we'll read it out on the air. We always love hearing from the fans. So thank you out there for listening, and thank you for joining me for this episode, Dad. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.